Hi, welcome back. Welcome to the second part of the CSS blog Code Along. We were making something like this, and in the first video, we had got all the content on the page, and we had wrapped the specific things inside the divs that we could figure out from this page itself. And if you're not able to figure out, you'd eventually be able to when you're making this. I did this because I could notice it because I've made a lot of these things and you might not have noticed it in first look, but of course you'll be able to do it once you've done some projects, right? And even if you're not able to do it, this is not that big of a difference because it's like very small, you'll see. So now the next thing that we have to do is we have to start styling this, right? And you see all the content is on the page. So this requires some good amount of styling. So now we're gonna use our third and the most preferred method is by using a style sheet, separate style sheet for the HTML document. And I have not made that till now, but I'm gonna link to it first. And I'll put a dash just to have the same name. You could choose to have different names too. Now I'll make a new file and then name it as CSS solution1.css. Let me confirm I have the same name, CSS solution1.css. Yep. And just to confirm that they're properly linked, you could do h1 color purple. And I see that h1 turns purple, although that is not something we want, but that just tells us that our link is properly set, right? So I'll refresh this again. So the first thing we see is that all of this is wrapped inside of this div, which is not taking up the entire space, and this is taking up a space which is of proportion to the browser width. This is always you would try out, and even after you've done a lot of things, you would try out by taking different widths, and then you'd eventually be able to figure out which one looks the best. You could have different widths too, but what I have here is if the length of this is 10 units, then this is 7 units, right? And that is always the case. If now the length is 10 units, even then this length is 7 units. So that obviously we can do with the percentage. So what we're going to do is we're going to see here that we gave this a class of container. So we can simply style container and give it a width of 70%. And so now if I refresh, so you won't see a difference up here because this was already the same, but you see that here all the content is now restricted to 70% of the area, right? It ends here rather than going all the way up here. So we've got our width right. However, here we see that our content is centered on the page and here it is not. So the reason behind that is that by default everything is aligned to the left, right? So what we want to do is we can give our container a margin. And if you remember that if you want to center something, then you can do a margin of auto, right? And then if you refresh, you see everything gets centered. We have equal margins on both the sides, and it's not visible right now because there's no background, but we see how this is happening. We have only 70% of the space being taken up by the div, and it is centered on the page. So to get a better idea of the div, we could first do body, and we could give it the background color that it has. So here you can see it's some light gray, and that light gray is personally my favorite color, S7X7X7 for background specifically, right? And now if I refresh, it's a very small difference. You might not have noticed it, but it is a little gray now, and you will notice it better if I give this container, because you can see that here everything is gray and the container is white. So I can give the container as a background of white specifically. And then if I refresh, it's quite hard to notice, I'm sure, on screencast, but if you see it on your own screen after doing all of this, this is a little gray and this is white, right? And just to show you that it's actually happening, I'll make this color a little more noticeable, however ugly. So we see this is working, right? This is something that we have, except our background is in black, and it's just simply hash F7, 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 right? This is a really light gray, but that looks good, right? So now the next thing that I want to add is that here we see that all of the content is centered, right? Here everything is left aligned, but here everything is center aligned. So that is through a simple property in CSS known as text align, right? So if I go to the container and I do a text align center. Now this is something you'll use a lot. So I see everything gets centered on the page, right? Even inside the div. So we've done one more thing to make this similar to this. And now the next thing that I want to do is that you will see we have some spacing up here, right? And this is not inside of a specific div. The spacing is mainly because of padding, right? So it is a little difficult to figure out how much padding I've given in this, of course, but I know what I've given, and that's why I'm going to do a padding of 1%. And I see I get a nice padding on all the sides, and now this looks a little better. So one thing that's making that page look a lot better is this line. And so this line, adding this line is not something very difficult, and it is not an underline first. It is a simple tag. What you have to do is you have to write HR, which is a self-closing tag, and that will add your line for you. That's it, right? So yeah, so we've added our line, and now we have almost everything done, except we see that this content is not taking up the entire container. That is because this is wrapped inside another div, and first of all, to style this div I'll need to have an ID to this, which is secondary, let's say, right? And then I can style this ID, and I can give it width of, now you might think that this is 70%, so we're going to need something less than 70% to make this not cover up the entire space. However, the percentage is a comparison with the direct parent. So if I do something like 100%, this would mean 70% of the whole page, because this is 100% of the container, right? So what I'm going to do here is 90%. And if I refresh, I see this gets restricted to a small area, but again, this isn't centered in the container. And we're going to do that with what we did earlier, is the margin order. So now all of this is centered and it looks pretty good, except one small thing that you might not notice on this screen size, because they look the same. That if I go in on this and on this, I see my image always has a nice spacing here, and there's no nice spacing in this one. In fact, a lot of my image gets cut out. It does not get cut out, but there's no spacing, right? So that is because the image has no property set here. The text align, and the image has no property set. It is covering the whole container. So what we can do is we can give the image a width of inherit. So now what inherit means is that it will always inherit its width from its parent element, which is the container, and hence it will never go out of that, right? So now it is always centered on the page, and CSS automatically does that the width and height are always in good proportion, unless you set them specifically not to be. But here we've just set the width to be inherit, and we see the image is now getting bigger and smaller according to our need, right? So this is all that we had here, and now we can start with the last part of this in the next video, right?